Greetings, Perl citizens. It is I, your fearless leader, once again, Will the Chill. Some of you may know me by my legal name, Will Braswell. And we are coming to you with another exciting and amazing episode of the Perl Town Hall. Welcome my special, awesome panel of Perl experts, Tommy and Dean. Tommy Butler and Dean Hampstead. All right, so go ahead and say hi, guys, and we can make sure that your microphones are working.
Hey, everyone. Hi. How's everyone doing? Whoa, that was loud.
Okay. Tommy's daughter says hello as well. Good. I can hear both of you, so I assume that means that our audience can as well. And our dear Benny is doing our audio check in the other room, as we often ask her to do. So today we will have our special panel, day 2 of the Perl Conference. And there was a couple sort of big announcements today, and nothing nearly as big as Perl 7, but some stuff that's kind of related to that. But before I go through my whole list of, I went through, oh my goodness, 9 different sessions today so far. But let's first toss it over to Dean for a minute and see what he thinks was some of the more important stuff.
Okay, just going to take myself on mute, and there we go. This is what you get for amateur audio from myself. So today's schedule, I guess, was a much more regular schedule as opposed to yesterday, where the Perl 7 announcement kind of overshadowed everything. For myself, I have only been able to get to a few sessions so far. Thankfully, we can review them on YouTube very quickly, so we can get through a few more of them. For the ones I have got a chance to look through today, I'll say the one that you should probably have a look at if you've only got an hour is probably the talk entitled Guac, short for Guacamole, from SawyerX, which was at 11 my time. And what he talked about was I guess you could say a sanitized sub-dialect of Perl that he is promoting, I guess, especially inside his workplace, which is booking, I believe, which is just taking a lot of the kind of insane stuff out of Perl, which is something that everyone should be doing anyway. They should definitely be using some type of Perl critic to strip down a lot of the insanities, and you'll probably enjoy some of the early slides where he goes through some of the more ridiculously ambiguous things that you can come up with in Perl that you should avoid. So I think if you're professional in Perl and you're running it in a company, you should definitely be having a look at what he's been doing. That talk especially is very interesting. If you're not doing CI pipelines with something like Perl Critic, even you can look at his Perl standard, which he's decided to come up with based on his Guacamole. Definitely think he's on the right track for so many different companies. If you've worked in a bigger Perl shop, then you'll definitely see the value in it very, very quickly. And I look forward to that gaining more traction, hopefully. Certainly, I'd say have a good look at it. The other talk that I did get to was writing a good Docker file for Perl apps by someone called Dom. That's what he's given his name in the schedule. That was at 9 a.m. That was about a 30-minute talk going through some of the basics of creating a Docker file if you want to put a Perl app in it. So that was a good basic introduction if you've never done Docker files before. He talked about some of the trade-offs in terms of size and recompiling speed and other things like that. Docker files are a pain in the butt, but they're a reality of technology in this era. So yeah, unfortunately going to have to review some more talks later on, but the ones that I would say take a look at would definitely be David Oswald at 12 p.m. setting up an internal darkpan. Definitely on my list. I'd say check out Getting Started with GitHub Actions, Mark Fowler and Olaf Alders at 1 p.m. Again, if I've mispronounced people's names, it's not an intentional slight. It is just a combination of my Australian accent and unfamiliarity with people's names. So please do not be offended and don't write hate mail. I'm also looking forward to checking out what can you do with YAML in 2020 from Tina Muller. That was at 9:30 a.m. So they should all be on YouTube, so you can check them out. Back to you, Will.
Thank you, Dean. Yes, I did get to see Tina's talk on YAML. It gave me an education about the whole YAML 1.0, 1.1, 1.2 thing, and had a few mentions of Ingi, our good friend. But yeah, that was cool. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Okay, let's go ahead and toss the ball on over to Tommy.
Thanks, Will. Okay, so watching today's stuff, I did sneak a peek at one of the talks, and the one that I was most excited about was the one by Curtis Ovid Poe about Core, which is an object system, a modern object system for Perl. I've made some comments on it, or about it on the Facebook group here, and I'm just really excited about about Perl getting a modern object system that's actually part of the language and not something that you have to use as extra, which means that we could be looking at optimizations that take away some of the speed penalties that you get from using things like Moose. Now, I've had people tell me in numerous occasions that Moose is slow, Moose is this, Moose is that. I've never been in that camp. I actually like Moose a lot, and I use like the class XS accessors and little things that help speed it up, and really never had an issue with it. Although for people that do things that are like lightning fast and where speed really does matter, it leaves a little bit to be desired. We need those performance enhancements that you would get by moving into the core. So I'm excited about that. I'm also excited about when you listen to that talk, you can tell that Curtis has had experience using some of the object systems that we have in Perl, like Moose or Moo, and has some really good ideas for solving common problems with them. I would encourage anybody who enjoys object-oriented programming to watch it, and if you don't, watch it anyway, because it was a great talk. And object-oriented programming, while it is not the be-all, end-all, I find myself using object-oriented programming for just about everything because it's that useful. And speaking of object-oriented programming in Perl, one of its pioneers was Damian Conway, who gave another talk today. I got to see a little bit of it. And he was talking a little bit about the tool chain that he uses in Vim and some of the tooling that he uses in Vim, and a zeroth virtue. In speaking of the three Perl virtues, those being laziness, impatience, and hubris. He's asserted that there is a zeroth virtue called envy, and that a good Perl programmer is envious of things that we see in other ecosystems and in other frameworks and in other languages that we want to bring into the family of Perl, and that a good Perl programmer sees those things and works to bring them in. And I agree with that. I agree with that a lot. So I was excited about that, and I didn't really provide context for the segue there, but the reason why Damian Conway's name came up in conjunction with object-oriented Perl is because he's one of its pioneers and wrote my very favorite Perl book, which is the object-oriented Perl book published by Manning. It's not my favorite publisher because I have long enjoyed the O'Reilly books that you see in our Facebook group image that I think Dean provided. But that book really does stand apart in terms of its approachability and helping you understand the utility of object-oriented programming and why it needs to be part of any kind of modern programming language now and at the time that it was published.
Awesome. Thank you, Tommy. Yeah, I got to see both of those talks that y'all just mentioned. In fact, I would probably put them as, I guess, two of the more important talks, or the two most important talks, I suppose, the Guac one from Sawyer and the Core one from Ovid. The keynote from Damian Conway was actually also very important. I suppose they were all three of equal significance because they all three kind of affect the language as a whole and the direction of the language. But yeah, just to give a rundown of the sessions that I went to today, I went to the lightning talks. I gave a lightning talk. That was a bit of a surprise. The Docker for Perl apps from Dom mentioned. Tina Muller's, Tina is her handle, the YAML in 2020 talk. Oh yeah, Tommy, you were at the Perl Foundation talk. You didn't say anything about that. You want to chime in?
Yes, so I did get to pick their brains a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to be transparent about the fact that I have a little bit of a mixed feeling coming out of that. So on the plus side, let's start with positives. I was able to ask my questions about, okay, well, where is the Perl Foundation trying to steer Perl? And what is our direction? And I was kind of delighted by the response that we got. They said, people think of us as being the head of a body, where the body is the community of Perl, and we're the head, and we're steering where it goes, and we control where that goes. And they said, instead of us being that, we're more like a chain that goes around many different interconnected, in some cases not connected at all, cogs. And when they move, we move. So I liked that analogy, especially when they began to explain how that translates to fiscal policy and the policies that they have regarding where grants go. And I thought that it was, and please forgive me, this is new stuff for me in large part. I know that Dean has a little bit more experience and understanding with this, as well as Will, but the grants don't just get handed out based on, okay, this is our say. They go up for public commentary, and that helps steer the TPF's decision-making in terms of where dollars get spent. There was a question that I asked about the roadmap that was kind of dismissed. So now we're getting in away from the positives into the negatives. I was asking about the Perl community roadmap and how any plans that they have may dovetail with that. They didn't really express a lot of support for it. And I'm not sure if that's because they just wanted to maintain that they were that they're a neutral party and that they kind of do what the community asks them to do. They steer their dollars where the community asks them to steer their dollars. And I kind of need, before I actually pass judgment, I need to watch the entire process for a few months, if not a year, to get a better understanding of how that actually works in effect. I want to get involved. I asked them for ways that we could get connected. I'm still waiting on the email for my Slack credentials or what have you, so I can join the Slack channel. But they said that there are ways that you can engage with them. They're happy to engage with you, and I'd like to get more involved with the Perl Foundation and figure out how we can make a meaningful impact, at least so that they can hear a little bit from where I'm coming from where we're coming from as a Perl community members, not so much as the members of the Perl Foundation. So I guess the final thought I had in terms of my response to that was that, and I'm sorry, I'm chewing through a lot of time. I'll wrap this up and be brief. My final thought was that I was hoping that they would express some kind of support that I didn't get. I didn't get that from them. I did feel like they were being sincere in the things that they said about trying to steer things where the community is trying to steer things. I'm a little reserved, and again, I don't want to pass any kind of judgment right now without actually seeing this take place. But I will say this, just very blatantly and plainly and bluntly, I have not been extremely enthusiastic about some of the steps that the Perl Foundation's taken in the past. I feel like they run contrary to the larger goals of Perl. The ways that certain things have been handled in the past, I have not been very happy with that, and I felt personally impacted by some of those things. One of the points that they made in response to my question was that they don't have a lot of power, and I would say that they do, because they have the mind share of being that head of the body, despite that may not be despite the fact that that may not be the case in actuality and in practice, they do act in an official capacity. They do help govern the community, and I'd like to see some kind of statement from them to the effect that they support or are trying to support certain things. I'd like to see a mission statement. I'd like to see that on an annual basis. I'd like to see a statement of where we want things to go and how we're going to help, and this is the plan. And it could be that I'm not seeing that just because I haven't looked yet. I admit that there's more research that I need to do, but I would like to see those things. Those are my thoughts. Thanks, Will.
Okay, Dean, do you want to say anything? Because we just had a lot of talking and you've been silent. I just want to give you a chance.
Yeah, so I need to catch up on that particular BOF session. But I will say that I do think under Stuart, the recent president, I guess he's been president for about a year. He was president of the last one. That I can see changes happening, definitely. The fact that they're having that discussion, the board discussion at the conference, I think is a positive step forward. I see that taking a new number and embracing slower changes, permanent changes in the language is being very positive as well. I think definitely from the outside, coming up with a new major number and saying, "Hey, we're gonna deprecate syntax," takes us out of maintenance mode, and I think that's a pretty nice signal to the companies that still are loyal to Perl, because from that perspective of companies using Perl, there's not many left. That's the reality of the situation, and so to a certain degree, if we continue as a community and even as a Perl Foundation board doing the same thing, I can't see how we're going to get different results. People concerns about the move to Perl 7 seem to largely be about breakage, but I think that for the most part, Perl doesn't have any real customers. It just has a few very loyal companies left, and we're not doing them any service by holding on to a lot of the syntactic problems. If you look at the Guac talk, you'll see a lot of the syntactic problems that really are there, even though the criticism that Perl is line noise and it's a write-once language. Like, you can look in some of the quirkier syntax problems and say, yeah, okay, there's some legitimate concerns there, and stripping those away doesn't diminish the soul, I guess, or the value of the language. It just takes away some of the weird rough edges that frankly no one really should be relying on anyway. So that's some of my thoughts. Again, I haven't seen that session yet, and I don't want to insert my own thoughts into it too much. But yeah, that's where I'm at with things.
Okay, awesome. Well, I want to just say hello, first of all, to everyone who's been joining us here. So that would be Moles Generoso, hello, sir, Jonathan Porras, and Sean Morris, Rahul Prajapati, everyone else that's watching. Hello, you guys. Just type in your comments and we should be able to answer you back, hopefully immediately. I want to bring us into the second half of our show, and we can finish up with trying to kind of tie it all together, because a lot of stuff has been announced yesterday and today. Of course, the main thing from yesterday was the Perl 7. And today we had kind of this, again, a triple header with the Guacamole, the core Carina, they're calling it, and also the PPR, which is kind of the underlying magic project that Damian has been talking about. So I think it behooves me to just give my own 30-second explanation of what each of those is, and then what I think the significance is, because they all kind of have to do with Perl 7, believe it or not. It's all kind of interrelated in a way. So Guac it's a high magic parser for Perl. So it doesn't parse the super high magic parts, which are the edge cases that Dean was mentioning a minute ago, but it parses everything else. So there's only a few things like here docs and places where you put spaces and stuff you shouldn't. And a few other things like requiring braces with prefix dereferencing, which I think is a good idea. All of the things, in fact, in the sort of standard Perl pragma that Sawyer is creating for the Guac project, I think they're all good ideas. And again, it's pretty much dialing back Perl from super high magic to high magic. If you try and use that for anything other than sort of enforcing good code practices, I question the value, because you're still in a very high magic mode. So you're not gonna, you can do some optimizations using the Perl data types, but trying to use low magic data types with high magic operations is troublesome from a compilation point of view. So I doubt that the transpiler part will ever give us the very, very high speed that an optimizing compiler would. It will probably give us some portability or other useful things, which are good. And so there's, you know, I also have mixed feelings about that, but just looking at it as objectively, what is its purpose, I think a lot of people kind of tongue-in-cheek say, oh, well, this is Sawyer's preferred list of Perl critics, but it's definitely more than that, because it's an actual Bacchus-Nor form grammar that has a parser using MARPA that outputs an abstract syntax tree, and that is something that can be used for code transformations and more than just analysis for bad code patterns. So that is an important thing, if only that it's being created by the current Perl pumpkin, SawyerX, and he's also the one who's come up with the and has the authority to implement the Perl 7 version number. So that's important. Curtis Ovid Poe, having now given us a more formal briefing on his proposed COR core object-oriented system, which I'll call Carina from now on pretty much, because it's confusing when you compare it with the name of the CORE, the Perl core distribution, which are all of the .pm modules that come along with a Perl interpreter when you download and install it. So the Carina system is important because it will finally give us one object-oriented platform for the official Perl distribution. And up until now, you have to either use Moose or one of the other ones on CPAN, or you have to create your own using the BLES operation. And in the RPerl optimizing compiler, I had to just create my own, Perl object-oriented Perl programming system, because there is no official one. So I'm excited about this because I will, and I've already discussed it with Ovid today, that we're going to work together, and I'm going to completely remove the custom object-oriented system in the RPerl optimizing compiler, and I will replace it with Carina. So I will take Ovid's grammar and merge it into the RPerl grammar, and Carina will be the official object-oriented system for the compiler. And that's also important because that will presumably, again, be adopted into the Perl core distribution, and that will be an official part of, he said, probably Perl 7.2 or 7.4, so coming up in the very near future. And then to finish my fast-talking explanation of all these three things, Damian Conway showed this very long-winded explanation of his new features that he built for Vim, but really the whole thing was this gigantic regular expression that it itself is either a derivative of or somehow based on this other even bigger regular expression that he showed us last year that's called PPR, and it's essentially a Perl parsing regular expression. I don't know if that's what PPR stands for, but I don't think anybody knows what PPR stands for, so I'm going to claim that I know what it stands for. And it's the gigantic Perl regular expression that can parse Perl for almost all cases. So it is a very high magic parser. It is not used by either the Guac or the Carina projects, but it could be used for other analysis going forward with Perl 7 or Perl 8, such as building IDEs that are very responsive, which is what he has started doing with Vim, and which I hope that will be extended to other IDEs, and perhaps Padre will come back and we'll have a real pure Perl IDE at some point. That's fast and native and does all the cool stuff that Damian showed today. That would be awesome. It would be really great. So it all does actually tie back to Perl 7, and it also ties into the Perl compiler that I'm responsible for in many ways. And it all, if you take it all together, this is my final takeaway thought. If you take all of this together, it is even more exciting than just the idea of having a new major version number, because we're going to have a new major version number with awesome new features. So to me, that's the real big thing. What do you guys think? Am I wrong? Did I give a wrong assessment about this?
Tommy, you going to go or am I going to go?
I'll go. I'll just say, yeah, I think that I second that the statement that it's not just going to be Perl 7 or Perl 532 with warnings and strict. It's going to be Perl 532 with warnings and strict, and possibly this object system that we're going to get with core and all these other things that that Will's been discussing. So that's even more exciting than what we were thinking about yesterday. Very, very cool stuff.
Yeah, so I guess my thought is, what I find interesting is I can see what I think I'm seeing from booking is that through Sawyer's concerns, I guess, which are underlying his talks, is that they're trying to root out avoidable problems, if that makes sense, which a lot of them come from the syntax. If you think about some of the more quirky problems he highlights, they're the sort of problems that might be hiding in your code base and take days, if not weeks, to resolve, and yet if you can ban them from your code base, you're not really affecting anybody, certainly not their productivity, and that you're saving yourself a lot of time on needless bugs. So I think it's a good idea from a professional point of view to be developing those sort of tools so that different shops can use them and they can avoid a lot of the problems. Certainly the other aspect you mentioned coming from Damian, Conway, which I haven't seen, is trying to improve the tools in Vim. There's actually good cross-platform tools which I haven't seen anyone talk about in LangServe, which you may have seen, which allows you to have like pluggable language backends and pluggable language front ends like Vim or VS Code, which is like VS Code's I think 50% of the surveyed Stack Flow people. So VS Code's a kind of a big deal. But yeah, if you're not using an IDE, which is I think a lot of Perl programmers, they're not probably understanding what a newcomer to the language kind of wants to experience. They want to kind of sit down and get that instant feedback from an IDE that's helping them, that sort of instant linting, which you can get in some other languages, and the refactoring your code that can come as well. I mean, certainly that's part of what you can see from Guac is the ability to automatically refactor your code. And having worked with Kieran DeMint, he developed a lot of tools based on PPI to refactor huge amounts of code base, like a large code base, just automatically, and remove problematic syntax and other things. So I think definitely if you're kind of working for a little shop where you've got your head around the whole code base, a lot of this stuff's not going to make a lot of sense. But if you're working for a company with enormous code bases and code that you're like, oh, this is pretty fragile, then a lot of these sort of tooling and these kind of standardizations are designed by companies and by people who are solving problems that in these companies. And they're not like necessarily solutions that are unique to Perl. They're happening in other languages at other shops, and it's just a matter of kind of saying, well, actually, they're good ideas. Let's bring them to Perl. Let's avoid these problems. Let's have good linters. Let's have quick feedback. Let's automatically refactor our code and get on with other things. So that's kind of my take on it, and that's my slant on life at the moment as well, having started with a new company that does a lot of that stuff. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it, Will.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on something you said there, Dean. And so, yes, when you talk about bringing things to Perl, that was the point that Damian made about the zeroth virtue of Perl hackers being envy, and that we want to bring good things to Perl. But the other thing that I wanted to point out was that when people make the statement that we should not move to Perl 7 because of breakage, that if we turn on warnings and strict that it's going to break code, I would say it's going to break bad code. I know that that's hurtful, but those are feelings that almost need to be hurt, because if you're writing code that doesn't work under strict pragma, or that just spews warnings, it's not good code. There's a reason why that warnings feature exists, and it has long been stated by, I believe, even Larry himself, that it's been considered a bug for a long time that warnings weren't on by default. Warnings help you avoid things that are certain to hurt you, and the strict pragma helps you, well, in many cases, avoid bugs that will take days to hunt down. I think anybody who's worked with Perl for any amount of time knows the pain, or who's worked with languages that don't enforce a strict pragma. They know the pain as well of having to chase down issues with scoping and the symbol table, stuff that's just a nightmare, suffering that you shouldn't have to go through if you're doing it right. So I'm all for doing it right, and I don't think that we should be afraid of moving forward. I think, like Dean said in some of his first comments, this is going to take us out of maintenance mode and let us move into the territory of actually building and growing. So that's awesome.
Can I add as well one thing that a feeling that I see expressed is people worried about the legacy code getting broken, and I really think that in a lot of ways CPAN and the infrastructure support CPAN is there to support moving forward. If you're not aware of it, Bleed Perl, which is like the next version of Perl that's constantly being worked on, is constantly smoked, is the word we use, against all of the modules in CPAN. So when they introduce changes of any kind, we see very quickly, well, the developers see very quickly what's breaking, and it can be resolved, be that in the module or in the Perl interpreter itself. And on top of that, so I think we have a good foundation to start building a little bit of extra tooling, which will allow us to turn defaults on or off, add new defaults, see what breaks. And then with a little bit more tooling in CPAN as well, we can do whatever's needed to say, well, this version's broken after this version. And I'm also excited because a lot of these other tools we mentioned allow the code base of CPAN, which is obviously a huge legacy code base, to be refactored. And those refactoring tools will, be available to companies with big code bases who are struggling with this anyway. So I mentioned that I work with Kieran Zemin, who wrote a bunch of these tools based on PPI, but they were kind of bespoke. So it'll be interesting to see less bespoke tools be made more generally available to help in refactoring big code bases. So I suspect people I think are afraid that the new Perl interpreter is just going to be thrown out there, but I think there's a lot of machinations and automation in there that are checking the interpreter against CPAN, and additional tools will be of huge benefit to all the Perl community.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you both for quite a group of insights tonight. This has been a very productive discussion, and as we're coming to the end here, I would like to just have a special moment, because we have someone who's missing from the Perl community. Jeff Goff, also known by his handle Dr. Forr, F-O-R-R, passed away recently. He's been one of the most long-standing members of the Perl community, and he's always was manning the booth at FOSDEM and OSCON with me, and was one of the founders of the Bad Movie Night with David Adler and so forth. So we already had a raised glass in the Bad Movie Night, but for those of you who are watching from home, since that was not recorded or broadcast in any way, I'll just raise my glass of filtered Texas water here, and Dean's got his mug, and just say, here's to you, Jeff, here's to you. Yes, raise your kid. Okay, well, then we will go ahead and bring ourselves to an end here. We've gone over our 30 minutes, but we'll give ourselves one final parting thought each, one sentence, 10 words or less, and I'll go first. Perl 7 with major new features. Dean, go.
I've got nothing. I'm done.
Yeah, that you kind of put me on the spot, but I would say just I don't have a few words. I've got this. I'm really excited about the kind of things that we're going to be able to do with the tools that we saw from Damian Conway. I'm really excited about what we're going to be able to do with Core. Let's just do this. Yeah, we've got our glass. Let's do this. Thank you, Ashley.
Well, thank you. She's doing an extra little toast. There you go for Jeff. Okay. Well, with that, we thank everyone for joining us. And this has been the Perl Town Hall from the Perl Conference panel, day 2. Thank you, everyone. Signing off, and see you tomorrow. Bye. And cut.